Hello quilters, it's Marianne Fontana, fontanaoriginals.com. You can also find me on YouTube and on Facebook. This pattern that I'm going to show you how to make today is featured in the March 2024 issue of American Quilter Magazine. If you do not subscribe to the magazine, I urge you to subscribe, and then you will get all the patterns for free. You join the American Quilt Society. It's an annual membership, and you will get the magazines as part of your subscription. The pattern that I'm working on today is called Flowering Prism, and this is it. It actually pictured here in the back, that's an AccuQuilt cutting die. And so you can make this pattern using either templates, which we will provide. The American Quilt Magazine will include the templates. It'll also list the shapes that you need to cut using the AccuQuilt cutting die, Flowering Snowball. I selected Island batiks from their basics line. I love Island batik. The colors are glorious. I've used an orange, a yellow, a blue, a green, a red, and a violet as the colors for the blocks. I've laid it on a neutral background, which is kind of like an ivory. And then the little cornerstones in the center of the flowers are done in black. And yes, Island Batik makes a black batik. It's beautiful. I love it. Anyway, let me show you the pieces that we need to cut and how we put the quilt together. The first pieces I'm going to cut are going to be the Flowering Snowball block. And this is what the block looks like as a single block. It finishes at 12 inches and it'll be cut at about 12 and a half when you sew it together. Normally the flowering part of the block is this one because it makes these circular designs and it looks like a little flower in the middle, but I have reversed the colors. So all the colors are going into the background and all the neutrals are going onto the snowball part of the die. I do have an AccuQuilt cutting die, and it basically consists of 3 shapes that you cut, and in this case you cut 2 at a time. Shape A is the background, shape B is the curved snowball, and shape C over here in the corner is the center of the flower. And that is all you need to cut. Shapes A in the colors that we talked about, and in this case it's 6 different colors that I'm using. Notice the AccuQuilt has little notches that are cut out when you get the cutting dies, which really helps it line up, which you will see when I demonstrate the sewing. If you do not have the AccuQuilt cutting system, we are including templates, and I have put notches on them. These templates, by the way, were created in EQ8. A pattern that is set on point. All the blocks will go at an angle when sewn together. So you're going to need setting triangles. You're going to need quarter square triangles, which are the big ones, and half square triangles, which are the small ones, and only go in the corners to finish this. And lastly, we have a 4-inch border around the outside, so you'll cut 4.5-inch strips for the border. And then my binding was done in black. I love that black batik. Let's go look at the layout of the block and sew it together. The first thing I did before starting to lay out the blocks is I separated my shapes A, which are the background colors, which are the ones that are in color, into 2 different equal groups, and each one has 6 shapes of each color in it. And I'm going to set one aside for now because I don't need it. I'm going to work with these, and I'm going to set my little black squares aside because I don't need those yet. And I'm going to work with shape B. So I have A and B. What I'm required to do right now is sew a shape B to either side of the A, forming a corner, if you will, and I have to make 2 of these for each block. If you'll notice, the little cuts here, the little marks, the little notches, are on both shapes, so I know I have to match these 2 pieces up. Now, if you've never sewn curves together, this is a really great block to learn it on because the curves are gentle and the block is forgiving. even though it looks a little challenging. If you follow my simple method, you'll be fine. The first thing I'm going to do is sew one side. So I'm going to take one shape A and one shape B and sew them together. And I'm going to string piece them all together. I really don't care what color it is because the sewing is all the same. If you're using the templates, you have marked your little notches in the middle, and that's going to serve to be your little area that we talk about when we talk about the notches, and that's how you're going to match up your two sides. And it's going to be very easy, and we're not going to use pins. I find pins just get in the way. So let's start. And I'm going to keep that nearby because I always like to look to make sure I'm doing it correctly. So I'm going to take one of the A's and one of the B's and say, this is how I have to line them up. So you make the long, and then I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to match up these two sides just as though I was sewing a straight seam. I don't care how these are going right now. I'm going to just put it under my presser foot, line it up. I have my 1/4 inch foot. I have my foot on the fabric slightly. And this really reduces machine eating your fabric. So I'm going to take a few stitches. 1, 2, 3. That's it. And then I'm going to go ahead and get these, whether you have a little line or you have a notch, and we're going to match them up as though we're sewing them on the straight, just so they're lined up exactly as they should be. And I'm going to put my finger there. And if you have the little notch, the little stripes, you're going to put your finger on the stripes, and I'm going to give it a little tug, and I'm going to look underneath to watch for my fabric to pop out. And there it is. Do you see the green? See the way it's matching right there? And I'm going to take a few stitches. And then I'm going to move along, and look, it's all perfectly lined up. Can you see that? So I'm going to just sew. The thing that's really neat is when you cut these correctly, you will get the bias in here and they will curve for you automatically. So now I'm going to go to the other side. I have my needle down. I've stopped. If you look, I've stopped right there where the notch is, if you can see it. Here's my little notch. Here's where I've stopped. My needle's down. Let's go back up. I get a little closer. Now I'm going to go to the corner, and I'm going to take this right angle and this right angle, and I'm going to line them up. Just like I'm sewing a corner, and I'm going to put my finger there, and I'm going to pull. Look at this. It just went right into place. You may need to put your finger underneath just a little to straighten out the green. Oh, did you see that? Look. And I'm going to sew. And right to the end. Make sure you hold it all the way to the end and come off. Now I'm going to chain piece it, but I just want to show you how easy that was. Look, I've got a fairly good seam. And then there's my curve. Look at that. Was that easy? Let's do another one. Let's do a red one this time. All right, so that's the way it goes. Put it around, turn it around, match up the right angles. Take a couple of stitches, 2, 3. Go down, match the points up just like they're sewing flat. I lift my presser foot up if I didn't say that, because it actually helps the fabric underneath line up easier. That's actually pretty good. And again, you don't have to sew the whole thing all at once. But once your short's lining up, there's no reason not to, but just you want to make sure there's no folds underneath. So that one's pretty clear. I'll go down to the notch, stop at the notch, needle down, twist my fabric. Again, take that point and put it at a right angle, just like you were sewing 2 right angles, like that. Put your finger on it and give it a little tug. Don't lose your finger position, but look at how nice that lines up. That is perfect all the way down. So I'm just gonna go for it. And if you notice, no pins. I don't see the sense of pinning everything and then putting it under the presser foot and then having to pick the pins up before you sew it, because it kind of defeats the whole purpose. And I find I stick myself, I bleed on fabric, it's a mess. But anyway, my no pins I think works fine. I finished sewing the shape B onto all of the shape A's that I needed to do in all the different colors. Now I'm ready to do the opposite side. So the placement is the same, flat side, points in towards the narrow side, and you're just going to flip it over and do the exact same thing in reverse. Put my presser foot on the fabric, 2 or 3 stitches, straighten out the notch, and I lift my presser foot if I hadn't mentioned that. I find sometimes it releases the fabric and makes it easier to get that curve. And also make sure you won't have any folds in it. There it goes. I'm just going to get a sew to the notch, and then I'm going to go to this side now and match up the 2 right angles on the pieces, just like if I was sewing them straight, just like that. Put my finger on it, give it a little pull, and there it is. It lines up beautifully. Now, part of this is because the fabric was cut on the bias, and then by pulling it a little, you are stretching it, allowing it almost to be straight, and then it will sew in fairly easily and simply. So that's it. Let's do another one, and as I like to, I'll do a different color. Let's do green this time. I'll turn it around, points in, there's the center, right angles together, 2 or 3 stitches, match the points straight, finger down, and again, if you really want to go use pins. I just find it takes longer, and I get really good results this way. So, I don't think it hurts if it speeds up the process. And to me, everybody knows I have a need for speed. I like to do things quickly, but I do want them to be accurate. Let's look again. And there you go. Now, if you see this is actually a crease in the fabric. That's actually sewn pretty good. Both of them are. So we will sew the other side together on all of the remaining pieces, and then we will talk about doing the other section of the block, which includes that little square point in the middle. All of these shapes are finished. The 2 Bs sewn to the 1A, and I have made 6 in each colorway, and I've pressed them all, if you can see, to the light side, and I did that just seeming that the curves wanted to naturally fall that way, so that's the way I did them. Now let's look at how we're going to put the other half of the block together. Here are the 2 shapes we've finished sewing the A shapes to the Bs. There were 2 Bs on either side of an A, and now we have to go back and get the remaining A shapes, and one has to go on this side, and one has to go on this side, and there will be a shape C sewn in the middle like that. So I'm going to sew up one side, half of the shapes A, and then I'm going to go put the other half on the other side and string piece them. So divide your colors into stacks of 3 blue, 3 orange, 3 green, whatever, and set the other 3 aside. These will be the first side we sew together. Let me show you how. So I have half of my shape A's divided. I have 3 of each of the 6 colors. And then I have my shape C. Very simple, easy, straight sewing. I'm just going to match up. There's no notches or anything you need to do for this. It's just straight sewing and sew the little squares on each end. I always like to start with my presser foot on the fabric. And there's one. And I'm just going to simply just lay them down in order, just like this. I'm going to match up the corners, push it under the presser foot, leave my presser foot just a little bit on the edge there. Take another one, put it on top, line it up, and I will continue doing this for all 6 colors. And I'm not going to cut them when I'm done. This is my last one. And they're all chained together. I'm not going to cut them. You can see, and I'm just going to pull them all back, just like this. And I'm going to open them one at a time and add the other side. So just like that, I have them all laid out. Now the only thing you have to be careful of is make sure you sew the right colors together. Both should be the same color. You should have 3 of each left over that you've set on the side, and these you're going to use for the second side. There we go. Then I will open them as I go. I'm not concerned about which way the seams are going. I will decide which way to press them when I compare them to the other half of the blocks and see how they need to be sewn together. So I'm going to wait on that decision. All I'm doing right now is opening up the shape C, which is the square, and adding the other shape A to the other side, matching up the corners the same way I did. And I haven't cut them apart simply because I really don't need to. There's no reason to. I'm not sewing anything against that other seam, so it could just kind of hang out there. So I'll finish these and then we'll talk about pressing. Here are the shapes I just finished. I sewed one of the shapes A to either side of the C, and I've decided to press the seams into the black. And the reason I'm doing that is that the other shapes were pressed out, so I want to press these in so I can get my seams to kiss. Now at this point, if you want to and you're not comfortable, you can go ahead if you wanted to pin them and match the pieces up here on the 2 seams where the corner is, just as a little anchor for you to work against. You're welcome to do that, but I'm going to go straight to sewing, and I'm going to sew this arc onto this piece, and then I'm going to go ahead and attach a second one to the other side. So here we are. This is what our finished piece will look like. We're getting near the end. I have 2 here. There we go. And this is what we're going to end up with. Back to the sewing machine we go. Here we are. I'm going to sew this piece onto this piece right here. And I'm going to flip it over. I am not using pins. We're going to use the same exact method we did before. We're going to take this right angle corner and we're going to match it up to that right angle. It's the same shape sewing we've already done. Put it under my presser foot, take 2 or 3 stitches. I'm going to then go to my notch or your mark, whichever you have, and I'm going to make sure they're matched up, and they are beautifully matched up. I'm going to sew to the notch with my needle down, same as we've done before. Now this is actually pretty cool because you have a seam here going that way and you have a seam here this way, and all you have to do is kiss them together. And as I said before, if you really feel you need to pin, go for it, but I'm not going to. Look at that. That is a perfect lineup. All I did was set them down. I lift my presser foot up just to make sure there's no fabric caught, and off I go. And I'm stopping right at the seam. Can you see where I am? I'm right on that seam, this seam right here. My pieces are matched up here. They're sandwiched. They're kissing. They're happy campers. We're going to go kiss the second side. Just as simple. Now, if you notice, this one's going down. That one's going up. Now, it doesn't look like it matches, so I'm going to give this a little tug. Now, my needle is holding the fabric in place. It's like a pin. And I'm going to hold it until it grips that side and sew just to the seam again. Let's back up. Let's go to our notch. Right there. Look at that. Perfect match. Keep sewing. To the seam. Go back to our right corners. Put them together. Check your fabric. I think this is actually, yeah, perfect again. Somehow when they start to sew it together, they just, the 2 curved seams seem to straighten out and just fit together beautifully. All right, let's look. So here we are. Here's the piece we just sewed. Okay. I'm not sure which way this seam is going to go, but for now, look, I think we did good. Keep in mind it's probably going in 2 different directions, but here, nice, nice, nice. Look, right? Let's back up. There. Let's do another one. I'm going to do a different color. I find sometimes doing different colors, it just makes life more interesting. Let's try a green one, shall we? So we have a green and we have a green. If you've noticed, I've always liked to keep this, I guess, out this edge, the inside curve at the bottom. I put the outside curve on the top. At least I call it the outside because it's concave versus convex. I'm going to start again at the corner. Presser foot on, 2 or 3 stitches. I think I took 4. Okay, match the notches up. My notches right there. Hold my finger. Look, look, look. I see. I always look to make sure that it's there. So to the notch, needle down. Kiss our seams over here. Right? Kiss, kiss. Beautiful. Happy. You can even pull it a little bit just to make sure it's snug. And look how that lines up. It almost like is meant to be. It's like sewing straight seams when you do it this way. Look at this. All right, into the seam again. Back to my notch. Look at that. You know, after you do it for a while, you get used to manipulating the fabric and you seem to learn how to hold it just so it drops in place for you like that just did. See, you could see the seam. Not the seam, you know, the edge. All right, shall we look? All right, and so there we are. Now, why don't we go ahead and do the other side? Since we're here, you have to sew both sides up. There is nothing different about sewing it. Here's the other side. Flip it over, start again. What are we going to do? Right angles together, under the presser foot, take a couple stitches, match up to the notch. You know, after a while, it just becomes repetitive and you become really good at it, and you just can hold the fabric in a way that, you know, it likes, I guess. So let's match these straight seams up. Make sure they're kissing. Oh, there's a nice smooch. Okay, get it? Oh, did you see that knocked up just a little under there? Stop with the needle down. Go across to the other seam. Make sure they're kissing. Oh, that one's going up. This one's going down. There we go. I can feel it now. To the seam. To the next notch. Hold it. Take a look. Yeah, looks good. Stop, needle down, go to the 2 right angles, put them together, put your finger there, straighten out the fabric. Oh, that one looks pretty good. And let's look. Not too bad, huh? And that's all you have to do. Simple, easy, just follow the notches, go from notch to notch, end to end, seam to seam, and they'll be done in no time. You are making 3 in each color. I finished all my blocks, did you? So I have 3 green, and 3 yellow, and 3 blue, and 3 red, and 3 violet, and 3 orange. And I've pressed all of the seams on the background towards the petals. The petals are the white and the color is the background. So you can see. It's just... Now all we have to do is sew them into rows, and then the rows into a quilt top. All my blocks are sewn and pressed and they're set aside. And then I have my half square triangles. I have 4 of them. And the half square triangles, as you know, has a straighter grain here, straighter grain here. The bias is here. And they're cut in half of a square, so that's why they call them half square triangles. The quarter square triangles are actually cut as a quarter of a block, and so the straight of grain is here and the bias is on the other two sides. So let's talk about the assembly. This is a layout which is included in the pattern that you will get in the magazine, in American Quilter. And I have numbered rows 1 through 6. I turned it on an angle because it's much easier to visualize sewing it. So let's look at the first row. We're going to need 2 quarter square triangles, which are the big ones, 1 half square triangle, which is the small one, and 1 green block. So here's my green right here. I'm going to move this one out of the way. Here's my quarter square triangle, which goes there, which will actually be one of the corners. And then I will sew the quarter square triangles on at an angle like that. And that will form the corner of the quilt. So when you look at this and you turn it, there's your quilt. But this is kind of how you lay it out because it's on point. All right, so that's your first one. And what I would do is sew this side, and then sew the top on. And that is row 1. Row 2 will have a quarter square triangle in either end, and then a blue, a violet, and an orange block. And it's just as easy as that. You lay the 3 out. Be aware that when you're sewing the quarter squares on, you're sewing them in the right angle. So just make sure you check the pattern each time. Row 3 is a little bit more trickier. You have to pay attention. You're going to put a half square triangle on the end because that's the other corner of the quilt. And then you're going to put a red, a green, a yellow, a blue, a red, and then you're going to put a quarter square. So this is what it looks like. Here is your half square triangle. You're going to sew it to a red. Easy as that. And then you're going to sew your red to a green. And the green will get sewn to a yellow, to a blue, to another red. And then when you're sewing this red on, the quarter square triangle will now be going in the opposite direction at the other angle, and you will sew it on here. Row 4 is exact opposite in layout to row 3. So you're going to start with a quarter square triangle, do a violet, an orange, a green, a yellow, a violet, and end with a half square. The half square only fits one way in any of the corners, but the quarter squares are rotated. So in this case, you're going to need a quarter square going down this way. And you're going to sew it to a violet. And you'll move them over. And you'll sew the violet to the orange, and the orange to the green, and the green to the yellow, and the yellow to another violet. And then you will add at the end the half square triangle, sewing it this way, and that will be the 3rd corner of your quilt here. Row 5 features 2 quarter square triangles on either side. We're coming down the back side of the quilt, a blue, a red, and an orange. So this side of your quarter square is sewn this way with the angle going down to the blue block. And then the blue block will be sewn to the red to the orange. And then you will add the other quarter square triangle with the angle going that way. We're heading towards the point and the last row. The last row is 1 block, 2 quarter square triangles, and the last half square triangle, which will finish off the point and give us a finished rectangular quilt. I'm going to go ahead and sew this first piece together and talk about just quickly how to do it. I'm sure you know, you may not need to, you could skip ahead. But in the event you want to see this demonstrated, I'm going to do this one, and then you can sew all the rest of them together. And then we'll talk about assembling all the rows into the finished center of the quilt top. All we'll have to do then is add the borders. I'm going to sew 1 quarter square triangle to either side, and then I'll add the half square. So my pieces are here, they're laid out. I'm going to set 2 of them aside. And I always have to make sure I am putting this in the right direction. And it has to go this way. So I'm actually going to flip it over this way and then turn it all the way around. I find it's just easier for me to start at a nice corner. I'm going to check each time a little bit just to make sure it's, going along even. And here this one looks a little funky. That one's okay. I'm just going to match it up down the bottom and finish sewing it. And I'll cut it off, thread off. Now the one piece is up. Now don't forget I twisted it around. So now it's back this way, facing this way, and I have to put one facing this way. So I'm going to take my other piece, line it up, make sure it's at the correct angle this way. Then I will flip it over and I can sew it into this side. Just simple straight sewing, nothing fancy. I match the ends up. What I do like to do is when I get about a quarter of the way done, I will match the 2 ends, the other side, together to make sure if there is a little, unevenness, we can even it out during the course of the block, the sewing of the block. Actually, this looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and finish it. Now the only thing I have to do is sew the corner on, which is that half square triangle, and it goes right on the top. And what you have to make sure is it's going to where the narrow piece is. Don't go where the wide is, it won't work. And when you put it across, I have both of these blocks on the outside. I have finger pressed the seams going out on each side. And I'm going to turn it and then add this, just like this. Put my presser foot down on my fabric, take a couple of stitches, and I'm going to actually go all the way to the other end where I have my other piece, and I'm going to match it up here. And put my finger down on it and pull it back. I'm actually going to hold it and pull it all the way back. And then I'm going to line it up. Keep my finger where the seams are so they don't go wonky on me. And every time I get to a seam, I'll stop. There's the next one. I'll reposition. Stop. And then I'll make sure these are still going the correct way they are. And that is how easy it is to put the first section together. And I'm going to go ahead and lay it out on the other board because this area is just not big enough. So here's the section I just sewed. Row 1 is done, and then you can just proceed along and do the rest of the rows. I finished sewing all the rows together. I have them lined up behind me. I've stacked them in the order I've sewn them. So I started here, worked my way down, and the yellow one is on the top. So now I'm going to sew them together. And whether you start here or you start there, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to start here simply. That's the way they're stacked. And I'm going to first take the 2, fold it over, match up the seams, sew it together, and just flip them. Very simple. I'll show you a quick demo, but then you'll work your way up. And as you go, just make sure you're flipping the key seams where everybody's going to look so that they will kiss and you'll get perfect seams. The first thing I need to do is flip over the first row that I'm working on and match it up to the next row, making sure that the ends meet because there's a wide part and there's a narrow part. And first we're going to sew the seams out, and then they're going to come back in the quilt because we're sewing it at an angle. So I've got my 2 pieces, and I'm going to pick them up and bring them over to the sewing machine. And we're matching up the shapes. If you've cut your shapes with the AccuQuilt shapes, this is very blunt nose and square, and you can just match up the flat pieces. If you've cut it rotary, you will have the points, and just make sure you're centering it. I like to take a few stitches to get started And then I'll go ahead and go down to the first seam on my strip, and I will match up the seams again, going in opposite directions. In this case, I'm going to let the seam for the quarter square triangle be pressed towards the quarter square triangle or the background color. And I'm going to pull it back because I want to make sure I get an even distribution of fabric all the way down. And I went over a seam, and every time I do that, sometimes I'll go back and just recheck to make sure nothing's slid. And I will sew exactly to that seam right there, this seam where the needle is. Then I'm going to go, now I'm dealing with 2 flowering snowballs. Now originally when we pressed these, we pressed all of the backgrounds towards the snowball shape, so now they're both going in the same direction. And I will never don't feel you can ever get a really good seam that way, so I'm actually going to flip the top one and sew it. I found there's really no great way to press the seams in opposite directions on the blocks, and to try to figure out which goes which way is almost impossible. So I wait till I get to this point, and then I make the decision to do this rather than having these straight and the seams not match. So this is my choice, to do it so the seams match. And I will deal with the fold here gently, and you'll never see it from the other side. So now I'm going on to the next piece, and as long, right now, these are my first 2 rows, so I can just decide which way I want this to go. And I'm going to press this one down, because I've noticed when I put that half square triangle in the end, that's the way I press the other side of this piece of the block, so I might as well keep them going the same way. And again, always stop on the seam. I'm doing the last section, and this is now the other quarter square triangle on the other side, and I will sew, just about 10% into the block to get it going a little, and also allow me to go backing up here, going to the edge of the block. I'm finger pressing the quarter square triangle on this end down, and I'm going to match up these corners again. Hold my finger in place and pull it back so that I get an even distribution of fabric. And I will hold my finger on the first seam, sew it, go to the next one, making sure, the fabric hasn't moved around as it does sometimes. Just hold it down to the end. And we finished the first 2 rows. And again, I'm more concerned about matching the seams than I am about turning them back and forth if I need to get a little bit better look on the front end. So I'm going to continue sewing the rows together, and I will show you the finished quilt top. So here it is. I finished it, my Flowering Prism, and it is in the March 2024 issue of American Quilter Magazine. I used Island Batik fabrics. Now, in addition to doing the rows as we discussed, I added a 4.5-inch cut border all the way around the quilt. So I am ready to go and quilt this quilt top. And if you're interested, stay tuned. I'm going to put some of the long arm quilting up to show you what I've decided to do. I'm just about ready to start quilting. I have everything up on the frame, and I've used that pretty violet color for the backing, and I put my batting on, and I have my quilt laid out. I've actually put it the long ways, so I have less, turning I have to do. And I've played with the design a little, and this, I think, is how I'm going to quilt it. So where the petals meet, I'm going to do, some feathering. I'm going to put a line down and then do feathering up the two sides. And then I think I'm going to do a big arc design in here. So I'm going to play with it a little bit. When I figure out what I'm doing and it looks decent, I'm going to show you what I did. All right? I've come up with my design for the quadrants where the four colors are meeting. This is actually the edge of the quilt. Here, the ones. I'm doing a little design like this, and I'm crossing it in the middle. This isn't done yet. I did the end ones first just to see how they looked, and that was this one. That was the first one I did. I think I'm okay with that. And then for the, what I'm calling now the melon shapes, because it's two petals together, I'm just doing some simple feathering on them. A little rough to start, but I'm getting better. Okay, just some simple feathering on them. And I wanted to share it with you, and I'm going to show you how I did these. I'm going to work on this section right here. I'm going to do the whole thing in that little starry pattern thing I showed you. I've already used a curved ruler, and I've outlined this, and I've outlined this. These have been feathered already. I'm working my way down. And I'm having a little bit of a problem. This is slightly bigger than the width of my sewing area, so I'm going to have to move it. But that's okay, it only is for the very first one. So it's all outlined, and the first thing I'm going to do, I'm using a straight ruler, and the first thing I'm going to do is draw a line straight across, hitting in the middle, stopping at this side, and then I'm going to do one down this way. And then I'll start my pattern. And I'm stopping in the middle with my needle down, and I'm moving my ruler over. Whenever I start or end, I like to back up just a little bit to try to, lock the stitches in place. I don't like to stop there and then pick it up later on, because I find you never get that perfect spin you really want. So that's it. I made my crisscross on the two sides, going in the two directions. And now I'm going to switch to a curved ruler. I have this one. I'm not sure what size it is, but it's the perfect size as far as I'm concerned to do this pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as my guide right here. And that's going to be the width of how I'm going to, measure my rows. I'm going to place the template right here against the quarter inch, the foot. I have a template foot here, which has got the raised sides so you don't accidentally sew it over. And then I'm going to take that other piece that I've showed you here, and I'm going to line it up to the edge of the melon, and that is going to be my width. I don't know if you can see that from there. Let's move over to this side. And this is the piece here. I'm lining it up so it's this width across here. And I'm butting this against here. Trying not to get it too much of a curvy piece, and I'm trying to get this at the thinnest part. So I'm going to do that, and then I have to put my hand, sorry guys, in front of you to hold it in place. And just gently sew down to the seam and stop at the seam just like that. Pull your ruler away. And you're going to go to the other side. You're going to butt this up here, and you're going to measure to the line that's halfway through with the edge of it. Keep in mind you've got 1/4 inch between your needle and the edge of your foot. So you have to allow for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get that mark where I want it. Move my handle down a little. And sew. And stop there. Now it seems a little, tedious, but once you get going, it's actually a fairly easy pattern to do. And I'm ready to start again. I want to put that over there on that side right there. And sew to the seam. because I'm changing directions once I get to the seam. Go ahead and line it up here, making sure I'm allowing for the 1/4 inch. And up to the top. Now I go to the other side. Come across here. See, I measured here. And my template's above that, so needle down, and actually I'm going to just slide this, make sure it's measured, and continue. Put needle down, come around, measure here, make sure the butt is against that. Okay, hold on to it, sew around. Come down, we're at the home stretch. And that's done. So now I'm just going to, can you see that actually? Right there. Okay, so now I'm going to just start again with the ruler. Come over here, and I'm going to measure this time. Let's look. You can see. And the next one is going to be done exactly the same. Now I'm always ending in the middle. I'm not gating over, I'm ending in the middle each time. And now I'm going to put the template against again, and I'm going to mark my measurement. It's the same thing. I'm using it all the time. Making sure I'm lined up. And I can sew. Only to the color change. You see? See, I've got 2 rows now. Can you see that? See? Yeah, let's get close. See, you can see my lines already there. So I'm just going to hit that against there, mark it so that I come into the middle there, and sew. And then I go back to this side. Come to the end and stop. And I'm just going to continue that way. Oops, you can't see anymore, can you, huh? Okay, here we go. Pretty easy once you get into a rhythm of doing it, because you just hit this against here and you make sure this one is far enough out. It's kind of hard to give you all the angles as I'm trying to hold it straight and talk to the camera and sew and make sure you could see, but you get the idea. Actually, I just got 2 more to go. Let's see if we can't finish it up. This will be the last row, I think. Let's see. See, I'm trying to make sure I kind of get in onto this line and hit this line. Even though I'm moving up a little, I'm okay with that because it kind of just, I think, adds to the interest. Let that go down a little further. And come back over this way. got 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 3, 3. I got one more on each side, and I am done with this one. See, it's really not that difficult. Just a matter of getting used to positioning the ruler where you want it. And I'm by no means an expert, but you know, I just practice a little, and it's not perfect, but you know, this is not for competition. I mean, it is for magazine, but quilters understand quilters aren't perfect. And as long as you make it with love, it's going to look beautiful. Sorry if my arm's in the way, but I got a little wonky there. I may have to go back in and sew that one over. At the end. And there you go. I think it looks pretty good. And let me show you how I'm doing the leaves. I'm doing the petal shapes, which ends up being like a melon, and I'm just doing a really simple design. I mean, actually, after doing these, they come out really cool. I feel kind of bad that I started doing these others, but you know, they look nice. It adds interest, and you know, hey, it's handmade. What can I tell you? So all I'm doing is a simple like loop on each side. Just like that. And then I'm going to just take 4 loops on each side, come to the middle, take 4 loops down the other side, stop, and then repeat it on the other side. So it's really very simple. And the trick is just to go slow and try and make them even. I'm not always successful, but you know, it's fun. And the whole point of quilting is you're doing it with love, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So here we go. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, and in the 4th I want to come into the middle, and I'm going to come around 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's all I'm doing. I should have cut that thread, and then I'm going to do the other side the exact same way. 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the middle. Come around, do another little one, and do 1, 2, and 3 more. That's because I'd already done this 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's as simple as it is. I do, unfortunately, have to either cut them off or just drag the thread over and then clip it. And I'm going to drag the thread over and clip it because it's faster. So let's move over. I'm going to clip the threads on the top and the bottom. And I'm going to start again. I'm going to cut this off. And it doesn't matter which way you go, which side you start on. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it doesn't have to be perfect. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then go to the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, and go to the other side. 1, 2, 3. And I'm actually going to put an extra one in here. No one's ever going to know, but it'll look full. And that's as easy as it is, and that's all I'm doing. I will have to show you the borders because I tried to figure out what to do for the border since I did put that 4.5 inch cut white border around the outer side, but I think I've come up with something that looks pretty cool. And I'll show you that, and then I will show you the finished quilt. I'm going to put black binding on it just to make the colors pop.